You don't know favoritism until you've seen it wrapped in $500,000. They made me believe I finally mattered, paid for my wedding, stood by me, smiled like we were a real family. Then 2 days later, they blindsided me with an invoice. They never saw it coming, the way I paid them back. Do you ever get the feeling, Frankie, that you were born as a background character in someone else's movie? That's the first thing I said after climbing into the back of your cab. I didn't mean for it to sound so heavy, but maybe the weight had been sitting on my chest for too long. You nodded at me in the mirror, didn't rush me, so I kept going. I was 4 years old the first time I realized I didn't matter as much as Benjamin. That's my older brother, 3 years ahead of me, with a mop of sandy blonde curls and this confident, gap-toothed smile that seemed to hypnotize everyone, especially our parents. Back then, I didn't know the word for it. Favoritism. It was just this invisible thread that tied everyone's hearts to Benjamin's every move. If he got a B on a spelling test, it was, "Wow, Benji, you're such a smart cookie." If I got an A+, it was silence. Maybe a distracted nod if I waved the paper hard enough in front of them. I remember one night, I stood in our tiny kitchen, my feet barely able to touch the floor from the stool, and recited a Spanish poem I'd memorized from one of Benjamin's storybooks. My mom, Margaret, was stirring pasta on the stove. My dad, Richard, was flipping through the TV guide like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls. I gave it my all, Frankie, rolled my R's, hit every line. When I finished, breathless and beaming, all I got was, "That's nice, honey," without even a glance. An hour later, Benjamin wandered into the room, announced he'd figured out how to microwave his own pizza rolls, and they acted like he'd split the atom. That's how it always was. Birthdays? Benjamin got party hats, pizza, a magician once. I got grocery store cake and a half-hearted happy birthday from whichever parent wasn't working late. Clothes? He wore crisp polos and new sneakers from the mall. I wore his hand-me-downs, shirts too wide, pants too long. When I turned 15 and got my first job bagging groceries at the Safeway down the street, it wasn't for fun. It was because I was tired of smelling like boy sweat in his old hoodies. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't some sad, neglected kid hiding in the shadows. I was loud, I was stubborn. I tried, God, I tried. I made honor roll every semester. I joined the school choir, the debate team, chess club. Anything to carve out a space that was mine. I remember saving up my tips for 6 weeks to buy a dress for a winter concert. Midnight blue, lace sleeves, subtle shimmer. I looked in the mirror and thought, maybe this time they'll see me. They didn't come to the concert. It wasn't just what they didn't do. It was what they did for Benjamin. He got a car on his 16th birthday, a used Civic, sure, but it was clean and shiny and parked in the driveway with a red ribbon. When I turned 16, I got a lecture about responsibility and a bus pass. When Benjamin got sick, even with a cold, it was as if the world stopped spinning. Mom would call off work, make homemade soup, fluff his pillows every 2 hours. When I had strep throat at 9, she left a bowl of crackers outside my door and told me not to breathe on anyone. At some point, I stopped asking. By the time I was a senior in high school, I had a 4.1 GPA, a part-time job, and 2 scholarship offers. Benjamin, who was already flunking out of community college for the second time, was still the toast of every family dinner. Mom would gush about his potential, and Dad would beam like the sun lived inside his chest. Me, I was reliable, self-sufficient. Those were their words. I think they thought they were compliments. But here's the thing about growing up ignored, Frankie. It does something to you. You stop trying to win the race and start finding peace in the places nobody's watching. I learned how to change my own oil before Benjamin did. I learned how to cook, file taxes, fix a clogged sink. I made a life out of scraps. And for a while, I told myself that was enough, until it wasn't. There was this one time, I must have been 22, when I got promoted at the accounting firm I'd been temping at for less than a year. It was a big deal. Full-time position, benefits, my own desk by the window. I called Mom. I never called first. But this time I thought maybe she'd say something nice. I told her the news, tried to sound casual about it. You know what she said? "That's great, sweetie. Oh, did you hear? Benjamin got accepted into a startup program. He's going to be a tech entrepreneur." That startup was a scam. He quit 3 months later. I hung up the phone, walked to my kitchen, and just stood there. I didn't cry. I just felt this low, familiar ache stretch across my chest like an old bruise coming back to life. That was the day I stopped reaching out. But even as I drifted away, the old lessons clung to me. I didn't trust kindness. I didn't expect praise. When my boss complimented my work, I'd deflect. When a boyfriend told me I was amazing, I'd laugh it off. Somewhere deep down, I still believed I had to earn love with sweat and silence. And even then, it might not come. I don't hate Benjamin. That's the part people always get wrong. He didn't ask to be the favorite. He didn't rig the game. But he never questioned it either. Never once stood up and said, "Hey, maybe she deserves a turn." And maybe that's what hurts the most. He lives in the city now. Some fancy job in marketing, I think. Still gets new gadgets every year. Still calls mom to talk about his latest vacation, latest venture, latest everything. She still listens like he hung the moon. I haven't seen them in almost a year. The last time was, well, let's just say it ended with me driving away, my voice hoarse from saying things I wish I'd said 10 years earlier. But that's another story. You know, Frankie, sometimes I wonder who I'd be if they'd loved me the way they loved him. Would I be softer, warmer, less guarded? Then again, maybe I wouldn't be me. Because the truth is, I built myself, piece by piece. Out of rejection, out of independence, out of necessity. Every cracked corner and sharp edge is mine. And while I still have days where I wish it had been different, I don't wish I were him. At least when I look in the mirror, I know the woman staring back didn't have anything handed to her. She fought for it all. And that's worth something, even if my parents never saw it. You ever feel like life throws you a crumb of kindness just to yank it back with both hands? That was me, Frankie. 2 days after my wedding, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed in a silk robe, sipping leftover champagne, still glowing from one of the happiest moments of my life, when I opened my laptop and saw it. An email from my father. Subject line, outstanding wedding balance. I laughed at first. Thought maybe it was some kind of joke. Maybe he was sending over receipts for bookkeeping or tax purposes or something harmless. I clicked. My smile disappeared so fast it hurt. An itemized invoice. Not even a polite message, just an attached PDF that broke down every cent spent at our wedding. The flowers, the catering, the venue, the open bar, the damn chair sashes. $49,782.45 in total. And one cold sentence under it, we expect prompt payment. Frankie, I swear to you, I just sat there staring at the screen like my brain refused to process what I was looking at. My hands started shaking. I felt this dull throb behind my eyes. It was like getting sucker punched in slow motion. Caleb came out of the shower and found me frozen, laptop in my lap, tears streaking silently down my face. "What is it?" he asked. I turned the screen toward him. I didn't even speak. I just let him read it. He went still. Then his jaw locked. His face turned that shade of red that only shows up when you're so angry you can't speak. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. And then he whispered, "They never saw you, did they?" He was right. But let me back up for a second. When Benjamin got married 2 years ago, my parents gave him $500,000. Let me say that again. $500,000. Cash, no strings, no repayment plan. Just a congratulatory gift so he and his new wife could buy a house in a gated community with a wine fridge and a saltwater pool. At the time, I smiled, I clapped, I helped plan the bridal shower and gave a toast at their reception like the good little sister I always was. And when they unveiled the custom front door to their brand new house, I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Wow, it's beautiful." Because that's what I did. I swallowed. My whole life, Frankie, I had learned to smile through the unfairness. When Benjamin got a car at 16 and I got a bus pass. When he flunked 2 classes and still got a trip to Italy, while I had to tutor to afford my own prom dress. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need them to love me the way they loved him. But when they offered to pay for my wedding, I thought maybe something had shifted. Caleb and I had been together 5 years when he proposed. He's this steady, kind, soft-spoken guy who sees me in ways I didn't even know I wanted to be seen. We didn't want a flashy wedding, just something warm, elegant, personal. We budgeted $50,000. Caleb had saved some. I'd squirreled away a chunk from freelance work. We were ready. Then my parents came over for dinner one night, and after dessert, my dad said, "We'd like to cover the wedding expenses." The whole thing. I was stunned. I stared at them like they were speaking a foreign language. I remember whispering, "Are you sure?" My mom smiled and squeezed my hand. "You've always been independent. Let us do this for you." And just like that, I let myself believe. Believe that maybe I'd been wrong, that maybe finally I wasn't second best, that maybe they were trying to make up for all those years of hand-me-down birthdays and invisible report cards. So I let them in. I let them help plan the wedding. My mother came with me to the florist. My dad negotiated with the band. We laughed over cake tastings, argued over seating charts, hugged in the parking lot after fittings. I even cried once, telling Caleb, I feel like they see me. God, I wish I could go back and shake that girl. Our wedding day was perfect. It really was, Frankie. The weather was crisp and golden, the way only September manages. The ceremony overlooked a small lake, and the sun set right as we exchanged vows. Caleb cried during the first dance. My dad even gave a toast that had people laughing through tears. For once, I felt like I belonged, like the ugly gap between me and Benjamin had vanished. My parents smiled at me like I was their daughter, not just the other one. And then, 2 days later, the bill arrived. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, Caleb and I packed our bags and left early for our honeymoon. We canceled all plans and went off-grid. I needed time to think, to breathe. But I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. The fake generosity, the way they smiled in photos while probably calculating cost per guest, how I'd let my guard down and dared to believe I was equal, only to be invoiced for my hope. We stayed at a tiny cottage upstate. No cell service, no internet, just trees and silence. At night, I cried into Caleb's chest and said the same thing over and over. Why would they do this? He never gave me platitudes. He didn't try to fix it. He just held me, and one night he said, because they never intended to give you anything. They just wanted control. This was always a loan, babe. You just didn't sign the paperwork. When we got home, I wrote the check. Every cent. Then I wrote a letter. I didn't accuse. I wrote plainly, honestly, with the kind of sharp clarity that only grief can bring. I reminded them of the child who recited poems in Spanish at 4 and got told, "That's cute," while Benjamin got a standing ovation for tying his shoes. Of the teenager who worked every weekend while her brother crashed cars and got new ones. Of the young woman who watched her parents hand her brother a house, then offered her a bill for a wedding they gifted. And then I wrote the final line, "You didn't just send me an invoice. You sent me a message. You told me I was never yours. Message received." I put the check and the letter in the same envelope. I didn't put a return address. Then I blocked their numbers. Frankie, it's weird. I thought I'd feel free after that, like I'd finally closed the door and taken back my power. But silence hurts too. Days went by, then weeks. No reply, no voicemail, nothing. Then the messages started coming, from extended family, aunts, cousins, family friends, angry, accusing, disappointed, telling me I was ungrateful, that my parents did so much for me, that I'd embarrassed them. One text said, "Wow, you get a dream wedding and you repay it with a tantrum?" Another, "Richard and Margaret gave up so much for you. You should be ashamed." I started waking up with anxiety pulsing through my chest like a second heartbeat. Caleb tried to intercept the messages, but it was too late. They'd declared war, and I was the villain. And yet, none of them asked to hear my side. None of them asked why. What hurts the most, Frankie, is that it was never about the money. We could pay it. Hell, we did. Caleb's a graphic designer. I'm a copywriter. We do okay. That wasn't the point. The point was, they saw my joy, my wedding, my love, my peace, and instead of sharing it, they used it. They turned it into another lesson, another moment to remind me that I'd never be Benjamin. That even when they gave, it came with strings. I'm trying to rebuild now. Therapy helps. Caleb helps. Some days I feel strong, like I finally broke a cycle that should have ended generations ago. Other days I scroll through wedding photos and wonder how many smiles in those pictures were fake. But I know one thing, I will never owe them anything again. And I will never let my children, when we have them, feel like they have to earn love by shrinking themselves. Because love shouldn't come with receipts. Not ever. It had been 3 days since I mailed the check and the letter. 3 days since I told my parents, with grace, with finality, that I was done being their second-class daughter. And now it was like I'd lit a match and dropped it into the center of a very dry forest. The first call came from Aunt Joan. "I just heard what happened. Are you serious? You made them pay for your wedding and then sent a nasty letter after everything they did for you?" Click, then a text from Cousin Rachel. "I always knew you were cold, but this is another level." Another from a family friend I barely knew. "Maybe therapy could help you find some perspective. Your parents are heartbroken." It was like they had a group chat going, rehearsing their lines. Not once did anyone ask, "What did they do to you?" Not once did anyone say, "Are you okay?" And then Benjamin called. He didn't even wait for me to say hello. "You are unbelievable." That's how he started. Not, "Hey," not, "Can we talk?" Just that. You had to create drama. You couldn't just be grateful and pay them quietly. You embarrassed them. You embarrassed us. "Us?" I said, my voice cold. "Yes, us, the family. You think this whole martyr act makes you look noble? All you've done is make things worse. They're devastated." "No, Benjamin, they're embarrassed. That's different." He scoffed. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder, and you've always had your hand out." Silence. Then he muttered, "You're sick," and hung up. I didn't cry after that call. I just stood up, turned my phone off completely, and walked to the bedroom where Caleb was sitting at his desk, sketching logos for a client. He looked up when I came in, saw my face, and opened his arms. I didn't say anything. I just climbed into his lap and let him hold me like I was made of glass. The next day, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. It was a man's voice, older, gravelly, but calm. "Hey, this is going to sound strange. My name's David. I'm your uncle, Richard's brother. I know we've never met, but I heard about what happened and, well, I just wanted to say, I believe you. If you ever want to talk, I'd be honored to. At first, I thought it was a prank, an estranged uncle. I barely even remembered hearing his name, but Caleb encouraged me to call back. Sometimes truth comes from the edges, he said. So I did. David lived 3 states away, a retired teacher with a rescue dog named Millie, and a laugh like a warm fire. He told me he hadn't spoken to my father in nearly 30 years. You're not the first to get the cold shoulder, he said. Back in '94, I told him I didn't want to invest in some sketchy property scheme your dad was obsessed with. I said no, one word, and just like that, I was out. They cut you off, I asked. No, he said gently. They cast me out. Big difference. He said it was subtle at first, missed calls, canceled plans. Then came the guilt-tripping letters, the sudden silence. The whispers spread to other relatives. By the time he showed up for Christmas that year, nobody would look him in the eye. They punish dissent, he said, make it a moral failing, so everyone else falls in line. I felt my throat tighten. He went on to tell me about their childhood, how Richard, the eldest, was always the golden one, the obedient one. David, the middle child, had always questioned things. Why their dad never hugged them, why their mom gave silent treatment like it was a weapon, why nothing they did was ever quite enough. They wanted loyalty, he said, not love. Love is unconditional. They never learned that. I told him what happened with my wedding, the invoice, the fallout, the mob of relatives storming my inbox like I'd committed war crimes. He listened without interruption, then said softly, they made love transactional, but you're allowed to say no to that kind of deal. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a wedding bill. It was about a pattern, a lineage. My parents weren't some uniquely cruel anomaly. They were part of something older, something inherited, and I had finally stepped out of it. After that call, something shifted in me. I stopped feeling ashamed, stopped second-guessing every sentence in my letter, stopped wondering if I should have just paid the bill, and smiled through the pain. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't dramatic, I was done. Caleb and I started putting distance in ways that mattered. We moved our emergency contacts, updated our wills, removed my parents from everything that tied us legally. Just in case. We spent weekends in our tiny garden, planting things that didn't ask anything in return. We talked about the kind of family we wanted to build. One where love wasn't performance-based. One where our future children would never have to earn affection by shrinking. A month later, I got one final letter in the mail. From my parents. It was thin, just a single sheet of paper. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just 5 words centered on the page. We're disappointed in your choices. I genuinely laughed. Then I tossed it into the recycling bin, poured myself a glass of wine, and went to sit next to Caleb on the balcony. The sky was pink that evening. The air smelled like lavender. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, I really am. It was a Tuesday afternoon, Frankie. That kind of dull gray sky that makes everything feel suspended. Caleb and I had just gotten back from the farmer's market, arms full of fresh peaches and daffodils, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me, I don't know, curiosity maybe, or the part of me that still wanted answers, even after everything. I picked up. There was a pause. Then, it's your father. That voice, slower than I remembered, strained like the words had to crawl their way out. I didn't speak. I was wondering, he continued, if you'd meet me, just once. No tricks, no agenda. I heard Caleb behind me setting down the produce. He saw my face, and his expression tightened. You don't owe him anything, he said gently, like he could read my thoughts. I know, I said, and I did, but something in my gut whispered that this wasn't a ploy. It didn't feel like guilt or even manipulation. It felt quiet. So I said yes. We met at a park, early spring, the trees still half naked, buds just beginning to show. I wore jeans and a soft sweater, no makeup. Caleb offered to come with me, wait nearby, but I told him no. This was something I needed to do alone. When I saw Richard, my father, sitting on the bench by the duck pond, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller, not in stature but in spirit, the kind of shrinking that happens when life chips away at someone, piece by piece. He stood when he saw me, tried to smile. I didn't hug him, just sat on the other end of the bench, a safe ocean of space between us. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure I should. He nodded like he understood. There was a silence, the kind that isn't tense, but weighty, like we were both holding something fragile and didn't want to drop it too fast. I read your letter, he said finally, twice. I didn't reply. I kept wanting to defend myself, he went on, but the truth is, I can't. Another silence. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Handed it to me. I didn't take it. It's the check, he said. Uncashed. I never deposited it. I don't want it, I said quickly. Still, I brought it, just in case. He set it on the bench between us like a peace offering. I think, he said slowly, I convinced myself for years that being practical was the same as being fair. That helping Benjamin more just made sense because he needed more. I let out a breath that sounded too much like a laugh. Dad, I said, I needed more too. I just didn't make you pay for it. He looked down, ashamed. His fingers twitched in his lap. I see that now, he said. I see a lot more now than I ever let myself. I didn't let myself feel anything yet. I didn't trust myself to. I'm not here for reconciliation, I said quietly, just so we're clear. I know, he said. I'm not angry anymore, but I don't forget, and I won't go back to being your second choice. His eyes glassed over a little. You were never... Don't, I cut him off. Please, you don't get to rewrite it now. You gave Benjamin $500,000. You gave me an invoice, and you might not have realized what that meant, but I did. He nodded. You're right. The wind rustled the trees around us. A few ducks quacked nearby like they were echoing my thoughts. I watched a kid chasing a bubble wand with wild abandon. Then Richard spoke again. I don't know what kind of father I've been to you, he said, his voice cracking slightly, but I know I haven't been the one you deserved. That hit me harder than I thought it would. Not because it fixed anything, but because, for once, he said something real. No excuses, no justifications, just truth. I spent so many years waiting for you to see me, I said, to treat me like I mattered. And I'm tired now. I'm building something else, something that doesn't need your approval to feel whole. I hope you do, he said. And I hope, maybe one day, you'll let me see it. That part, I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Instead, I stood, brushed off my jeans, looked down at him. I wish you well, Dad. I do, but I need space. I don't want to pretend things are fine, and I can't rebuild something that was never built right to begin with. He nodded again, slowly, accepting. I turned to go, but as I walked away, he didn't call after me, didn't beg, didn't argue, and maybe, for once, that was enough. Later that night, I curled into Caleb's arms on the couch and told him everything. The silence, the check, the admission, the goodbye. Do you feel better? He asked. No, I said, but I feel lighter. That was the truth. Not healed, not happy, but lighter. These days, our life is quieter, richer in ways that money never touches. We have our routines, Saturday morning coffee on the balcony, crossword puzzles half finished, music echoing softly from the kitchen as we dance barefoot on hardwood floors. Our apartment is filled with plants and secondhand furniture we fixed up ourselves. Love lives here. Real love. No receipts, no conditions. Sometimes Benjamin still sends texts. I don't read them. I let silence answer for me now. My mother hasn't reached out, and my father? He hasn't written or called since that day in the park. But I think about him sometimes, not with anger, just as a chapter I've finally stopped rereading. I don't know what the future holds with them. Maybe there'll be more conversations, maybe not. But here's what I do know. I'm not afraid to choose myself anymore. And that, Frankie, that's more than enough. If you made it this far, thanks for riding with me. If you love real, messy, emotional stories like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. There's always another confession waiting in the backseat.